Dalkaen here, and this is my review of Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE for Wii U. As a huge fan of both the Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei series, I was more than a little excited when I heard just about 3 years ago that Atlus was working on developing a crossover title tentatively titled SMT XFE. It was an announcement that came totally out of left field, and for the longest time no details whatsoever were available about the game, and it was thought to have entered that dreaded development hell. SMT XFE could have been so many things. All we knew for sure was that it was going to be a more traditional turn-based RPG instead of strategy like the Fire Emblem series. Still, it was exciting to consider all the possibilities. I don't think anything could have prepared me for what we ended up with. Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE is an absolutely bananas hybrid of elements from Shin Megami Tensei, particularly the Persona series, and Fire Emblem, but is also a wholly unique entity all its own. It could be loosely described as a Persona game, featuring a cast of pop stars that fuse with mythical Fire Emblem heroes, and sing and dance a lot to battle demons who feed on energy given off by initiates of the performing arts. By siphoning performa from the public, these demons seek to resurrect an ancient evil. Yeah, what? This bizarre hybrid of a title features a colorful cast of playable characters that are all in the entertainment business. Kirya and Yashiro are wildly popular pop idols, while Toma and Eleonora are struggling to break into Tokyo's acting scene. Tsubasa and Mamori tend to dabble in a little bit of everything, whereas protagonist Itsuki largely takes on a supporting role by appearing as an extra or performing backup vocals. Did I mention Itsuki is not a silent protagonist? I'm immensely grateful for that, even if his personality is not too well defined. Each of these playable characters has a demonic companion called a Mirage, meant to emulate the feel of Shin Megami Tensei series demons or Persona. However, in the case of Tokyo Mirage Sessions, each of the playable character Mirages correspond with a hero from the Fire Emblem series, pulled either from the somewhat recent Fire Emblem Awakening, Tharia, Chrom, or from the original game of the series, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. This is appropriate, I suppose, since the World of Awakening takes place in the same world as the first game, albeit far into the future. Of course, these Mirages have very little memory of their past, and don't understand why they've taken on some pretty twisted attributes. Navarre's corkscrew arm is pretty disturbing in particular. Chrom, bland and heroic in Fire Emblem Awakening, is now dark and mysterious. Itsuki himself seems to have taken on a lot of his attributes, and the attributes of a lot of Fire Emblem protagonists, to be honest. But still, I can't emphasize how glad I am that he's not a mute protagonist. The actual gameplay of Tokyo Mirage Sessions reminds one much of your typical Persona title, although there are some nods here and there to main series Shin Megami Tensei conventions. Much like Persona 4 or Etrian Odyssey, the game is split into a series of themed dungeons. They're called idolospheres in this case, and seem to spring up whenever a group of nasty Mirages coordinate an attack on the populace to drain their performa. This tends to happen whenever a concert or stage production is going on, because of course that's just precisely when their performa is ripe for the picking. The idolospheres feature some light platforming and puzzle elements that lend a sense of variety to what is essentially dungeon crawling. The Wii U gamepad fills out the map for you as you progress, leaving ample real estate on the main screen for exploration. Your party members will frequently send you topics, which are basically text messages, that can be read on the gamepad and give you hints on how to progress or just to add flavor to the mission at hand. Itsuki and co. will find themselves flipping switches, exploring alternate pathways, and avoiding traps, but the game never delves very deeply into these mechanics since the focus, for me, is on the combat. Since Nocturne, games in the Shin Megami Tensei series have generally featured combat systems built around a mechanic in which exploiting elemental weaknesses is very important. In the case of Nocturne or Digital Devil Saga, exploiting these weaknesses nets the player extra turns. In the case of Persona 3 and 4, enemies are knocked down, rendering them incapable of fighting back for a turn. Tokyo Mirage Sessions continues this trend by introducing a mechanic called Session Skills, in which characters string together attacks when a party member triggers an elemental weakness. For instance, Tsubasa casts a wind spell on an enemy with a wind elemental weakness. Kirya then follows up with a wind spell of her own because she has the Session skill that corresponds with that. Then, Itsuki follows up with a thunder attack, and so on. As you progress further in the game, you unlock the ability for all party members to participate in sessions, regardless of whether or not they happen to currently be in the active party. This means that these combos frequently reach 7 or more hits. Just when the novelty of this starts to wear off, the game then introduces duo arts, flashy collaborative skills that trigger randomly during sessions. These skills not only have tremendous utility, but can extend sessions even further, supposedly up to 20 hits, although admittedly I never got lucky enough to hit that. Tokyo Mirage Sessions features enough new elements to its combat for it to have its own unique identity disparate from the two series it crosses over, but it also pays homage to both in a lot of interesting ways. Although the way in which you exploit weaknesses in the game is classic Shin Megami Tensei, the game cleverly pays tribute to Fire Emblem by featuring the game's series' tried and true weapon triangle. All Mirages can clearly be identified to fall into a traditional Fire Emblem class archetype, and as such wield traditional weaponry like swords, lances, and axes. In the world of Fire Emblem, swords beat axes, axes beat lances, and lances beat swords. Additionally, flying enemies are weak to wind and bows. This takes a lot of the guesswork out of exploiting weaknesses, particularly if you're armed with some Fire Emblem knowledge going in. There are even a series of skills that reference specialty weapons like Horse Slayer and Armor Slayer that trigger weaknesses against mounted or armored units. The difficulty on hard mode is satisfying but not frustrating. Most encounters, especially bosses, require a reasonable amount of strategy to prevail. There is little in the way of cheesy strategies that allow you to plow through the game's enemies. Mercifully, most enemies in the Adala sphere can be avoided, although it is occasionally challenging to do so, especially when the cloaked ghouls representing enemy mirages pop up around you on all sides. It does add to the tension of exploring the dungeons somewhat, but it's worth noting that it's possible to save at any time. This screwed me over a couple of times early on, since without save points I was having trouble actually remembering to save. If there's anything frustrating about dungeon crawling in Tokyo Mirage Sessions, it's that the loading times are a little high. It does make things take a little longer than they should. In the Persona series, characters channel the abilities of their Persona companions and learn new abilities over time as they level up. In Tokyo Mirage Sessions, characters are capable of fusing with their mirages in a process called Unity to create weapons called Carnage. These Carnage weapons determine elemental weaknesses and resistances as well as the abilities they learn. By collecting materials from the enemies vanquished in Idala spheres, it is possible to create new Carnage weapons and learn new abilities. Some weapons can only be created with rare materials and teach abilities that these characters might not otherwise have access to, such as teaching Tsubasa a fire spell or Toma a wind attack. Each character also possesses a number of unique skills, passive and otherwise, that can be acquired from increasing in stage rank or by completing their individual side stories. Each of the game's characters feature 3 different side stories which vary from endearing to downright wacky. These side stories feature many of the game's excellent musical performances, and although optional, it would be pretty unwise to skip them. In a lot of cases, these stories really flesh out the characters in question and generally teach the character a new ability. Admittedly, they do become a bit contrived at times, since the objective generally seems to boil down to revisit previous dungeon and kill 10 of this thing. Many of the non-combat side stories are much more interesting. When you consider the amount of vocal performances in Tokyo Mirage Sessions, it's no wonder that Atlus decided to keep the game's voice acting entirely in Japanese. Of course, they could have simply dubbed the dialogue and kept the songs as they are, but I think I'm pretty satisfied with the way they handled it. The only minor gripe I have with that is that none of the in-combat banter is subtitled, and these characters tend to chatter a lot. Of course, it's pretty clear what Toma means when he yells "Combination!" during sessions, but otherwise I have no idea. I feel I have to emphasize just how good the music in Tokyo Mirage Sessions is, both incidental and otherwise. There's not a single number performed by the game's characters that I disliked, but the incidental music and combat themes are generally excellent as well. Although I'll admit that the standard combat theme eventually became grating, I generally always looked forward to hearing recurring themes such as the catchy dance tune that plays during some of the side stories, and pretty much any of the tunes that play during duo arts. There is a performance near the end of the game that is absolutely awesome, but I won't spoil that here. I encourage you to experience it for yourself since there is a pretty considerable amount of build up to it. Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE is the best game I've played this year. It is not without its flaws, but they are minor and quite forgivable. It may not be close to the dark, gritty title that Shin Megami Tensei diehards were looking for, but I'm a big fan of the wildly original and deliriously colorful game that we ended up with, and I eagerly await a potential sequel, as unlikely as that may be. I can only imagine how Atlus could choose to evolve the format. There is a lot of potential there.